Did you know that on the Titanic, many people slept on the lowest decks, right where you had the least time to react? In third class, the distance to the open deck was physical: stairs, locked doors, long corridors, and when the ship scraped along the ice, it could feel like nothing more than a mild shudder. While down below, water was already moving in. If you want to see what it meant to start farthest from any real chance of survival, like the video, subscribe to the channel and come with me into the Titanic's lower decks. On the lower decks, third class runs like its own world. Narrow passageways, doors packed close together, and the constant thrum of the engines. It's warmer, louder, and more sealed in than the spaces above. Even on an ordinary day, getting upstairs takes time. Long routes, turns, and flight after flight of stairs. Evidence suggests many passengers were used to staying within their own section, moving on routine, meal hours, shared rooms, familiar corridors. That internal geography creates a real distance to the open deck, even when everything feels normal. Night deepens, the ship keeps pushing forward, and the divide between above and below becomes sharper than ever. Third class was filled mostly with migrants, people traveling with compact luggage and limited means. The spaces were simple but organized: shared cabins, a dining saloon, wash areas, and predictable routines. For the era, it was considered relatively good compared to many Atlantic crossings. The critical issue wasn't comfort, it was position inside the hull, far from direct evacuation routes. In an emergency, every detour and every staircase adds minutes you never hear about in the famous accounts. Down here, daily life shows how physical distance can turn into risk. Look at the route to the upper decks, and the first thing you notice is the vertical climb. Staircase after staircase, landings, corridor changes. Movement is shaped by gateways and transition points that guide flow between sections. In normal conditions, that means order and separation. In a crisis, it creates choke points. The Titanic was designed to function as a compartmentalized machine, and that logic also governs how people move inside it. For anyone starting below, evacuation doesn't begin on the boat deck. It begins in the maze, and the lower your starting point, the higher the time cost to reach any exit. The ship's internal barriers weren't just about human choices. Many were built into the architecture and the rules of circulation itself. Gates, locks, and transition corridors decided where people could go and when. On a voyage with hundreds of passengers, that helps manage routes, hygiene, and order between sections. The problem is what happens when priorities shift from routine to urgency. The same design that keeps things organized starts slowing everything down. Third class has to funnel toward a small number of upward routes, and those routes were never meant for crowds moving all at once. In that moment, being near the deck or far from it becomes a difference in real opportunity. As the night wears on, the lower decks grow quieter but never truly silent. The engines still pulse. The hull still vibrates. People try to sleep in compact cabins with little room to move, luggage tucked close within reach. Lighting is practical and limited, throwing long shadows down the corridors. On ships this size, small shifts and strange sounds are normal. That's why not every signal becomes an instant alarm. What changes little by little is the traffic. More people step out into the passageways to see what's going on. Third class begins to switch from routine to watching. Outside, the ship looks steady and immense in the Atlantic darkness. Dim lights, the steady slap of water along steel. Inside, reality is corridors and levels, where every section has its own acoustics and temperature. On the lowest decks, changes in vibration are felt more through the body than seen with the eyes. That contrast helps explain why the sense of danger doesn't arrive at the same time for everyone. Some people still drift through common areas. Others notice small details. Dampness near the floor, a corridor suddenly busier, a crewman moving fast. Evidence suggests that at this stage, information is still fragmented, and without clear information, reaction time slips away. When the ship scrapes the ice, the sensation on the lower decks can feel subtle. A short tremor, a different vibration, a shift in the ship's rhythm. People wake up without understanding why, trying to interpret what they feel. Instead of a dramatic crash, it's a stack of small signals. The behavior of the engines and the structure changes quietly, and anyone who's awake can sense it. Because news doesn't reach every section at once, the corridor becomes a place to hunt for clues. Third class enters a fog of uncertainty that lasts for precious minutes. On the lowest levels, the first signs show up in practical details. Damp seams dripping, small puddles that spread as people walk through. Crew members move faster now, checking passages and control points. In a compartmentalized ship, any assessment depends on internal routes. It depends on reaching specific doors, specific corridors. For passengers, the effect is immediate. The ship still feels normal, but the flow of people is no longer the same. Some start climbing on their own, trying to shrink the distance to the deck. Others wait for instructions because the old routine still feels valid. That gap between signal and certainty is where the lower position starts to matter. As the water advances, the problem stops being abstract and becomes geography. Certain routes turn wet, slick, and slower. Passengers lift bags, look for higher paths, try to keep families together in tight corridors. Third class must funnel into stairways that were already cramped in normal conditions. Evidence suggests choke points form quickly here, because everyone is chasing the same solution: up. The sound changes too in places where water and metal begin to dominate. Every minute of hesitation becomes more bodies packed onto the same landings. And at this stage, the distance to the deck is measured in steps and in time. When movement finally starts to organize, it runs almost entirely toward the stairwells, with the crew trying to open passages and keep the line moving. From down here, evacuation doesn't begin with lifeboats. It begins with queues on landings and tight turns in narrow spaces. Night still owns the world outside, and that shapes everything. Little natural light, heavy contrast, decisions made by instinct and by whatever you can see. And this is where third class becomes painfully concrete. Access is physical, not symbolic. If you want to follow how these corridors and staircases decide who reaches the deck in time, like the video and subscribe to the channel, then stay with the sequence until the moment climbing stops being possible. From here on, every level you gain changes the odds. On the lower decks, the problem becomes visible on the floor. Water spreads into corridors, turning them into slick lanes that force people tight against the walls. For third class, evacuation becomes a chain of bottlenecks where a single door or a single corner can trap dozens. The crew tries to widen access and keep the climb continuous, but the narrow layout sets hard limits. The effort increases because the route isn't direct. It's a stitched-together climb of vertical segments and internal transitions. Evidence suggests that even now, many people still don't have the full story. They only have a pile of signs. Outside, the ocean stays black. Inside, the urgency keeps rising. When an internal door blocks the flow, time bleeds away in operational silence. Key, lock, hinges. One hallway stuck behind it. That kind of delay is decisive, because water doesn't need instructions. It just follows the lowest path. Meanwhile, stairwells and landings fill up, and movement turns into compression. Bodies pressed close, fighting for space to breathe and inch forward. Third class faces an access problem. It's not enough to want to go up. The path has to exist and it has to be open. Evidence suggests the climb happens in waves, each barrier releasing the crowd in bursts. This is where risk stops being a theory and becomes logistics measured in minutes. As people reach higher levels, the atmosphere shifts. More light, less dampness, colder air, a sign they're closer to open spaces. Even so, movement still depends on transition doors and specific routes, and new lines form at every access point. The crew tries to direct the flow, opening doors, preventing corridors from turning into total blockages. For those coming up from below, it feels like progress. But it also feels uncertain, because the final destination still isn't in sight. Outside remains a uniform darkness, making orientation harder. Still, every landing gained shortens the distance to the embarkation decks. When the cold air takes over, it becomes clear the ship is sitting on the edge between sheltered interior and open deck. The final climb passes through heavy doors and last staircases that turn into critical points of concentration. On deck, the Titanic scale looks different. Davits in rows, lifeboats in their cradles, coordinated movement as crews prepare each station. Evacuation isn't instant. It requires order, ropes, pulleys, timing, control of lines. For those arriving now, the shock is the contrast between the interior maze and the exposure to wind and darkness. Third class begins fighting for time in a place where everyone wants the same thing, a spot in safety. On deck, wind and night reshape urgency. It's cold, it's dark. Everything depends on practical lighting and direction by motion. Lines form near the boat stations, and the crew has to prepare each position before anyone can board. Evidence suggests groups arriving from below reach the deck at different moments, creating sudden surges in certain areas. For many, the challenge isn't only getting there. It's figuring out where to go when the only visual references are ship structures and moving crew. Third class, already losing time on the climb, meets a new obstacle: waiting and controlled flow. And while they wait, the ship keeps changing. While the deck tries to hold order, operational decisions continue in enclosed spaces where the windows show only black ocean. The focus there is coordination and sequence: prepare, verify, release, repeat. Outside, lifeboat work demands strength and mechanical precision: ropes under tension, metal parts groaning under load. For those waiting, small signals become huge: the ship's balance, the way objects behave on the deck. Evidence suggests the list doesn't arrive all at once. It accumulates, then becomes noticeable in details. This is where evacuation stops being a plan on paper and becomes a race against a growing tilt. As flooding advances, the bow tends to sink lower, changing the ship's overall balance in slow progression. On deck, people adjust their stance. Small items begin to move where they once stayed still. At the same time, the crew accelerates lifeboat preparation and davit handling, because every launch cycle depends on pulleys, cables, and locking mechanisms working without failure. Evidence suggests the ship's voice changes too. More groans, more sharp cracks, deeper vibrations. For those who came up from third class, it adds another layer of pressure. First the maze below, now the ship's clock. The main scene becomes efficiency under cold and darkness. As the tilt becomes more obvious, internal routes grow harder, and circulation concentrates into fewer safe corridors. Doors are used to control flow and prevent people from being funneled into dead ends. On deck, the work continues in short, precise motions, checking pulleys, controlling tension on cables, lowering boats in careful stages. Night keeps the sea mostly invisible, so wind and water become louder than sight. Evidence suggests that at this phase, reaching the deck doesn't guarantee a spot right away. Organization at the stations becomes the deciding factor. From here, space and time start shrinking faster. On deck, evacuation depends on one repeated detail. Each lifeboat must be prepared, locked in, balanced, and lowered with cables under load. Meanwhile, lines form in narrow spots, and wind makes waiting physically harder. For anyone arriving from the lower decks, time spent climbing becomes less margin to absorb delays in preparation. Evidence suggests that as the ship's balance shifts, the body gives it away first. Posture changes, steps shorten, Hands reach for support. Darkness strips away visual reference, so direction comes from the flow. From here on, the sequence is increasingly dictated by the mechanical rhythm of the davits. As the bow sinks further, the deck reveals the tilt through simple effects. Objects sliding, footsteps needing constant correction. Boarding becomes crowd control because every boat station creates a natural choke point. Instead of a sprint, what you see is compression. People waiting, advancing a few feet at a time, repositioned to keep the system moving. Evidence suggests the ship's sounds deepen, with heavier groans and water more present around the structure. The sea remains pitch black all around, reinforcing isolation. And as lines reorganize, the time left begins to drop faster. In the bridge area, the scene is enclosed and lamplit, with windows showing only night and dark sea. The goal is coordination. Reduce uncertainty, keep sequence, turn procedure into continuous execution. On deck, distress signals and lifeboat preparation run in parallel, with crew working cables, locks, and last-second adjustments. Evidence suggests boats already in the water start pulling away to avoid suction or debris. From the outside, the ship still looks enormous, but the geometry of the sinking is now unmistakable. The bow is in control. From this point on, the two realities, command and deck, converge on the same physical limit. Inside the ship, the tilt turns corridors into ramps and movement starts demanding strength and balance. Doors and passages are used to control flow, because the wrong corridor can become a dead-end trap. For those still trying to climb, every step costs more energy, and usable space collapses as people concentrate into narrower routes. Evidence suggests that in these moments, architecture outweighs any written rule. The ship decides where passage is still possible. Colder air signals closeness to the deck but doesn't promise immediate access. Evacuation becomes a handful of last corridors before the final breakdown. On deck, the growing tilt changes how work is done. Ropes under tension demand tighter control, and every movement must be short and safe. The last boats are prepared under constant mechanical noise, while the ship's structural sounds grow deeper and more frequent. Evidence suggests that Titanic enters a phase of accumulated stress, when the structure is forced to bear loads it was never built for. From the lifeboats pulled away, the silhouette begins to look broken, shaped by the sinking itself. The bow is no longer a point. It's an unavoidable direction, down, and what time remains is measured by the hull's physical signals. When the structure reaches its limit, the transition is abrupt. Stored stress becomes rupture, and separation happens with the bow dropping first. Everything changes in seconds because the ship stops being one platform and becomes two masses behaving differently. Evidence suggests the energy released shows up as violent shuddering, tearing metal, and massive displacement of water. From the lifeboats, it looks like deformation and collapse. Lights trembling, the outline changing shape. The sequence matches the sinking pattern. The forward section disappears first, and from there, what remains enters the final phase as a separate structure. After the break, the stern hangs on for a short time, elevated and unstable, while the sea rebalances what's left. The deck pitches into an extreme angle, and any movement becomes an immediate risk of slipping or losing grip. Activity turns fragmented, limited to a few actions near handholds and lines. Evidence suggests that at this stage, the ship loses height quickly, and the sound of the ocean takes over. From the lifeboats, the stern appears as an illuminated mass that fades as it sinks. And when it finally goes under, the space the ship occupied is replaced by waves, debris, and a kind of operational silence. After the sinking, what remains is a debris field in darkness, small waves, constant wind. For survivors in the lifeboats, the shock isn't only visual, it's logistical. Cold, water, distance, uncertainty about rescue. Evidence suggests the sea quickly spreads floating objects, and orientation depends on far-off lights and the slow, exhausting rhythm of the oars. Third class, which began at the lowest point in the ship, ends the story in a world with no reference points at all. The starting advantage or disadvantage is gone. The final reality is the same black surface for everyone. And that sequence, distance, delay, access, helps explain why for third class survival was farther away from the very first minute.
Based on period records, created for educational and narrative purposes.